Hey, what's up, good people? Once again, welcome to Mono to Atmos episode 2. And as promised, today we're going to be talking about the history of sound, where it came from and, where it's going. And so it's going to be about the history of sound from where we came from to where we are at and where the future looks like, what the future looks like. So before I start, remember this is a capacity building place for the East African filmmaker. And there's not just the East African filmmaker, but the Sub-Saharan Africa filmmaker. But there's something I want to talk about before I even start about Sub-Saharan Africa. I don't know where we got this notion that we're not supposed to document our work. And for this reason, it becomes very hard for us to find any proper documentation about matters Sub-Saharan Africa. Why? I really don't know. We'll maybe get to discuss that. But I want us to understand the reason why I decided to do the history of film sound from the onset to date is because history is very important. And maybe you're going to be able to see how important history is and why it's also very important for us to start documenting our journeys, our encounters, our works. But I also understand that because of issues in Sub-Saharan Africa, issues to do with kickbacks, issues to do with non-payment, issues to do with incompetence, issues to do with mediocrity. We are afraid of documenting our works, but we need to get to a place where we are now willing to just go on ahead and document properly our works such that we are able to find a clean history of what we've been doing, especially in the film industry, but not just in the film industry, anywhere across whatever works it is that you do. It is very important that we are able to document our works for future generations so that they know what we did, how we did it wrong, how we got it right as we move forward. So when does film sound actually begin? This is going to take us way back into the story of someone called Thomas Alva Edison. And Thomas Alva Edison was born in 1947. And at a very young age, I think about 3 years or so, he got scarlet fever. So he got scarlet fever and he was quite sick. Then scarlet fever was known to be killing kids. And so the parents were just giving him medication and hoping that he's going to get better. But by medication, I mean dabbing him with just water to kill the fever, but he was in a lot of pain. But apparently, Thomas Alva Edison was able to overcome this disease. As a result of that this disease, he was left partially deaf. So Thomas Alva Edison could not hear so well in both his ears, I think. And it becomes very interesting that later on, this is going to be fundamental because Thomas Alva Edison becomes the father of recorded sound. So Thomas Alva Edison, there's something interesting that also happened in his life where the father seemed to know something that most people did not know, because at some point the father says that the future is in the railroads, and they decide to move to a place where there's railroads as opposed to where they used to live. The other thing that happened to Thomas Alva Edison, especially when he was a kid, is that when he was taken to school, it was a Presbyterian school. The teachers there thought that he was slow. So one time there was an inspector who had gone to the school to just see how he's doing, and the teacher went and mentioned to the inspector that Thomas Edison was slow, or rather he was idle. And apparently Thomas Alva Edison heard what this teacher said and went and told the mom. The mom got so infuriated. He went to that school and asked the teacher, confronted the teacher and asked him, you think my child is slow and stupid? And he's like, if there's any problem in this school, it is you. It cannot be my child. So what happens is he takes his child home and decides to homeschool him. While he's doing this, he gets him books, all kinds of books that he would get. And Thomas becomes very fascinated with books on science and experiments. In fact, he decides to have a small laboratory in the basement, and this even put him in problems with the mom, because there was a lot of smell of chemical components in the house. He was trying to experiment with everything that he could. At a very young age, also, he comes across the inventions of Morse, who had come up with the Morse code. So he decides to make a small Morse code device in his room where he's able to communicate with one of his friends, and he starts to, at a very early age, start to understand Morse code. Eventually, he gets a job as a candy seller on the railway roads, on the wagons, and he starts selling candy. Eventually, what this leads him to is that he ends up one day deciding to stop at one of the railway stations and take a break. While he's taking a break, he notices the manager of the railway station operating the Morse code, the telegraph. okay, in Morse code, getting information from other railway stations. And he gets so fascinated, and he's really drawn to this because, remember, already he had had an encounter where he had created his own Morse code machine, his own telegraph machine, and he had an idea of how to operate it, but now he was seeing it being operated at a professional level. So what happens is, as he's walking outside the office, he notices a kid playing on the rail tracks, and there was a train that was coming and hooting. So he runs, saves this kid, brings him onto safety. But as he's doing all this, the mother to this child sees what he's doing. But apparently, this was the child to the manager of the rail station, and he became indebted to Edison, and asks him, "What can I do for you?" And Edison knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted to be trained in the art of being a telegraph operator. So that begins his journey of understanding technology. And in 3 months' time, he was very good as a telegraph operator. He started operating the telegraph in many places. He worked in so many places as a telegraph operator, and he was so good because at some point he started even doing inventions around the telegraph. But at the same time, there was another person that we need to also talk about, who is also the father of sound, and is called is Alexander Graham Bell. And Alexander Graham Bell is the father of the telephone. So what he was able to do is he was able to convert mechanical signals into electrical signals, or rather sound signals into electrical signals, transmit them, and then reconvert them from electrical signals to sound signals on the other end. So he's the father of the telephone idea and the whole telephony that we have today. So what happens is, as Bell comes up with this technology, Edison gets so interested and also decides to follow the path of the same. But now what he does is he tries to figure out how he can be able to record conversations that are happening on the phone and store them. So while he's trying to do this, he comes up with a way to convert these vibrations, the sound vibrations, into a recording medium where it's able to record, store, and then reproduce the same. This is where all sound comes from. This is where all manipulation of sound today comes from. So we get to understand that we owe to these two people, Edison and Bell, our entire understanding of sound. We owe it to them because they were the first ones to figure out how to convert sound signals to electrical signals and back into sound signals, and Edison was able to understand how to capture sound signals, record them, and then reproduce them through what was called the phonograph. Why is this important for us to understand? Because this is where all this sound work comes from. This is where now the present day softwares get their roots from. If it was not for someone like Bell, and it was not for someone like Edison, we would not be able to maybe record sounds or even convert sounds. Because remember, the whole aspect of sound is being able to capture sound, convert it into electrical signals, store it, manipulate it, reproduce it. And these were the first people to do this. So fast forward into what happens in the 1920s is the film industry then was, before the 1920s or during the 1920s, it used to be called talkies because, it used to be called silent era. It used to be called silent era because there was no way to reproduce sound. And based on these early inventions by Bell and Edison, in 1927, we have the first film that was done using sound that was called a talkie, and it incorporated sound in itself, and this was mono sound. And this became something magnificent because now it changed the entire film industry. I won't go into the details of how it changed the entire industry, but it meant that some people who were used to overacting on screen had to now figure out how to change and start understanding how to use dialogue for their performances, and it completely changed the film industry. Then we go to stereo, where Blumen comes up with a stereo technology, and for him, what happens is it becomes a way of embracing sound, not just using one discrete signal or one channel, but rather two channels. The same way we have two ears, we're able to now have a slightly more immersive way of receiving sound or even reproducing sound. And this happens, I think, in the 1950s. Then we fast forward into the 1970s, where we have someone by the name Ray Dolby. And Ray Dolby comes up with the first stereo Dolby. And this stereo Dolby was a 4-channel surround system where you had your right, your left, your center, and one rear surround. So you used to use four speakers. And this is just a quick summary of the history of film sound. So Ray Dolby comes up with this technology, and it was a way more immersive technology. Okay, where I think Star Wars was one of the first ones to have used this technology, and it was brilliant. Okay, it was amazing. Fast forward into the 1990s, where again Dolby Laboratories, that was founded by Ray Dolby, comes up with now 5.1, which is now 5 discrete speaker system, with the 0.1 being the sub, which means in total there was 6 speaker systems. And this completely made the experience of cinema holistically immersive. Okay, so in the 1990s, that's when 5.1 comes up, and then now everything is changing in the cinema world, because now we are able to consume cinema in a way more immersive way, in a way more interesting way. Fast forward now to 2012, and in 2012, Dolby Atmos shows up. And Dolby Atmos is a complete change of what everything else has been, because remember, from mono to 5.1, it has all been a way of consuming sound in a discrete manner. But when you get to Dolby Atmos, it means it is now 360 sound. You can put your sound anywhere in 360 space, and it becomes even way more immersive, because now it's not just about having it in the rear speaker or the right speaker. You can put it in between the rear speaker and the right speaker. You can put it on the top speakers, because with Dolby Atmos, it's all about it added, instead of just the 7.1 surround channels, it added 4 height channels. So we had a 7.1.4 system where sound can be placed anywhere within this speaker system, but in a manner that is 360. Okay, so this is the transition of sound from mono to Atmos. And this is the sad thing that I want to say about Africa and where we are. We've not been able to transition from the mono era. We are still stuck in the mono era that happened in the Americas in the 1920s, between 1920s and 1930s. And why do I say that we are stuck in the mono era? I've been in the industry for a while. I've looked at works that have been done by multiple people. Man, I realize that most people still don't understand the difference between mono and stereo, and most people are actually stuck in doing work in the mono space. And this I speak about, especially film. I realize that music has tried to transition, and music has an understanding. The music industry has a general understanding of the stereo workspace. So all the stereo that we usually have in film is usually just the music. Okay, so we need to figure out, how do we move, because the world has moved ahead of us. The world has moved way ahead. We are still in mono and stereo, while the world has moved into Atmos. And it's about time we sit down, we ask ourselves, shall we tell our stories at a global level still using mono and stereo, or are we willing to elevate our craft and be able to tell our stories at a global stage using the latest technology that is there? That is why we are here, to enable us move and make a transition from this mono stereo era into the Dolby Atmos era. I hope this has been insightful to you. Until we meet next time, my name is Lawrence. Cheers.